In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a short chord progression using the Choose Next Chord panel in Harmony Builder and using the principles of tension and release. So, what do I mean by tension and release? Well, if you go to the user manual and select the tension gradient section, you'll see that I've drawn a chart in which chords progress from one to the other, and you want chords to build tension and then resolve tension and then rebuild tension, resolve tension, and so forth. And in the chord selector wheel, which is represented here, the more tense chords are higher up in the position in the wheel, and the less tense chords are lower down. So as you're building tension, you want to select chords that are moving up the wheel, and as you resolve it, you want to select chords that are moving down the wheel. Of course, the one chord is the ultimate rest for the progression, and the 7 chord is the most tense chord. So the overall flow of the chord progression could look something like this, where you build up and you release, and you build up and then that you finally release the tension, going to the home chord, the 1 chord at the end. So going back to our chord progression, let's say we want to build a progression with which is 2 bars long. So I've basically created 2 bars here, and my first chord, we're in the key of C major, so my first chord is going to be a C major. I can select it from the chord grid. It doesn't have to be a C major, but that's a good starting point. If you're in C major, it's a good idea maybe to start with a C major chord. And when I click Add Chord, the program enters a chord in open position, a root, a fifth, a third, and a root. And it's always good to have your first chord as spread out as possible, because the wider the position of the notes, the more choices you'll have as you move to the next chord. If I now select a second chord for the second beat, I move over to the second beat with my right arrow key, and I can choose anything really. 1 goes anywhere. So let's, for example, pick a 4 chord. That's about middle tension. It's halfway up the wheel. And I want to keep it in root position and first choice, which means it will have a root, a third, a fifth, and another root, and see what we find. You can see there's lots of options for this second chord, and if I just choose one randomly and add it, you'll see that it has this shape here. Now, how do I reduce the number of choices I have? Well, one way would be to apply the rules of harmony to ensure that the voice leading between the first chord and the second chord is correct. And you can either do that because you know the rules of harmony, or you can select them from the checker panel, and that will apply the rules of harmony for you. So in this progression, I'm going to apply all the rules of harmony. I'll select the successive fifths and octaves rule, the hidden fifths and octaves rule, the unisons rule. I'll make sure that the note ranges are within the acceptable ranges for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. I'll also make sure that the notes don't go too far apart, so the interval limits are respected. And also there's these 4 rules here which are not active at the moment because they're not relevant to this chord that I've selected. But those rules will become relevant later in the progression, so I want to make sure that they're selected. And to do that, I have to exit the builder panel, and at that point I can select all the rules. So this is the preparations rule, 7th rule, leading tone rule, diminished fifths rule, and the neighboring voice position rule. So all the rules of harmony are selected, and now when we go to the Builder panel, we can again do a search for the 4 chord. The 4 chord is an F major chord, and you can see that down here in the nomenclature panel. The chord symbol is specified. So let's press find, and we get 2 results, one with a higher bass note and one with a lower bass note. Now again, I want to keep my voicings as wide as possible, so I'll choose the chord with the lower bass note, and I'll add it to the score. And here we go. That's our 2nd chord. Now I can move over to the 3rd beat and select another chord which builds the tension a little bit more. Let's say a 5 chord. Let's see if we can find something for root position and first choice. Yeah, we have 3 choices. And we have 2 with the lower bass notes, and the 2 choices basically swap the tenor and alto parts, so they're pretty equivalent. I'll choose the first one. Add it to the score. Move over to the 4th beat, and now I want to resolve this tension that I built up, and I'll resolve it by going back to 1. Let's see if we can find some results, and there's one result here. We'll add it to the score. Here there's a little infringement of interval limits. Usually you don't want to have the distance between the bass and the tenor a third or less. It becomes a little muddy, but it's not a serious rule, it's not a serious infringement, so which is why the program actually allowed it. But it's just letting you know that it's not the most ideal situation. You want your bass note to be as far away as possible from the tenor. And let's move over to the first beat of the 2nd bar. Let's just scroll over like that. And I'm going to go raise the tension a little bit by selecting a 6 chord. And let's see if we have any results for root position. Yes, we have these 2 chords here. Again, they're pretty equivalent. The tenor and alto are swapping positions. Now I want to build the tension a little bit more, and this time I want to see if I can insert a 7th chord. So I'm going to choose a 2/7 chord. And move my cursor over to the next beat and search. Yes, I have one result. And as you see, the preparations rule has ensured that the 7th is prepared, so that 7th note has to be present in the previous chord, which is good. We have that little problem with the small interval between bass and tenor, but we're going to let it go for now. Let's move on to the next beat. 2/7 going to 5. That builds the tension a little bit more. Let's see what we can find. Okay, we have no results for a first choice. Let's try a second choice. That means we have 2/5 in the triad. No, nothing with 2/5. Maybe with 2/3. Nothing with 2/3. So we're going to have to resort to first inversion. Let's try again with a first choice chord. Nothing first inversion. Second choice with 2/5. Nothing. Third choice with 2/3, and we do have a result. And notice how tricky that was. We had to search around a little bit, and the reason for that is because we have a 7th in this chord, and because of the 7th rule here, the 7th must always fall by 1 step. So we needed a following chord that had a B in the alto part. So we had to search around for that a little bit. And finally we can place our final chord. We're going to resolve it all back to 1. Let's see if we can find a root position first choice, and yes, we have one possibility here. And again, our leading tone rule is respected. So in this chord, the B is a leading tone. But since we have 2 B's, because we have 2/3, we don't have to resolve both of them to the C. Just one of them has to resolve. So the B goes to C, the leading tone rises, so that's fine. But we're still being told that the other leading tone isn't rising. That's why there's a circle around the alto. But we know that doesn't have to be, that's not a problem because we've resolved it in the other part, in the bass note. So that's our progression, and let's listen to it. Now the next step is going to be to fashion a melody over this chord progression. As it stands, there's not really much of a melody. So in the next video, I'm going to enrich the soprano part with more notes in order to create a melody over this chord sequence. Thank you.